Welcome to the Mujeres Create podcast. I'm Jessie, your host, and we're here to celebrate your limitless creative power. It's time to awaken your magic and manifest your wildest dreams. Join us for this next conversation. Hi, everybody. Welcome back. This is Behind the Success, episode 7. And this episode is called I Heart My Career, My Last Role. In the last episode, I talk about my Google experience. And after Google, I ended up getting recruited by iHeartMedia. iHeartMedia is a massive audio company. They have hundreds of radio stations all over the country. They have a massive podcast network. They throw probably some of the sexiest music events all over the country. They do a lot. And I worked at Google, and before that, I had never heard of iHeart. I think iHeart was called Clear Channel before, but they rebranded. And in that rebrand, I had no idea that it was such a massive company. So I got recruited by iHeart. I talk about all the negotiation. I think the third episode, negotiating your value, that whole experience. I talked a lot about the stresses that I experienced while working at Google. So going to iHeartMedia, the first day, I remember feeling so happy, so excited, so refreshed, so relieved to have landed in a new company. I have to say that I was received with a lot of warmth. Everybody that I met that day, that week, that month, or over those first few months, everybody was just so amazing, so warm, so friendly, so human. Coming from a place like Google where everybody was so serious and tense, high anxiety, it was very refreshing to get to a place where I could feel human again, and I could feel I could be myself, where I could just breathe and work at a normal rhythm. So I got to iHeart to run the multicultural sales division, which had been dormant for a few years, but they were reviving it. And so I came in 2019 for that. And, I was in my role for about 5 or 6 months before the pandemic happened. So the first 5, 6 months were truly like a honeymoon stage. I was traveling all over the country. I even flew a private jet once, the company jet, and I was just so excited to do that. I got to go to Fiesta Latina. I met J-Lo. I got to do so many cool events. I think 2019 was a really fun year for iHeart. And so I got thrown into all of that. And it was amazing. It was so refreshing and fun. I was back in media. I was back in my environment. So it was very exciting for me. And then the pandemic happened. And so very quickly, the excitement, the momentum we have built around multicultural quickly fell off because obviously with the pandemic, a lot of the advertising budgets were cut. A lot of companies were going under. Media companies were just trying to figure out how to survive. For radio, people listen to the radio when they're commuting to work, when they're going to school, in their car. And without that activity, we lost a lot of radio listenership. And so the company was dealing with a lot of, complexity at the time. So I knew that, I couldn't really take it personal that multicultural was now low in the priority list. Although it happens, like some companies never kind of make multicultural a big priority. So it's something that comes with the work, unfortunately. But in this case, it was the pandemic. There was a lot going on. I couldn't just think this was only affecting me. It was affecting everybody. And so, the focus on multicultural quickly took a turn. The priority, the attention, the momentum was hit really hard. I spent a few years in that role. I think it was almost 2 years in that role, or maybe a year and a half, in limbo. There was really no focus from an advertising perspective. The company itself didn't really want to invest in any multicultural programs or initiatives. So I was just kind of like, do I even need to be here? Do I need to work here? This feels like we're just pushing a boulder up a hill that is unnecessary. And so it was that year, that first year and a half was really tough. When the George Floyd news happened, the entire country was trying to figure out, how could this have happened? How do we put more focus on initiatives that shine a light on underrepresentation, on disparity, on inequality? And iHeartMedia saw an opportunity to create the first diversity and inclusion role. I had been very vocal about this area, DE&I, and I had started to do some of that work internally on my own, just gathering people, offering support, offering resources, offering help. When you work in multicultural marketing, DEI is very closely aligned. It's two different things, two very different things, but they're very closely aligned. So understanding cultural sensitivity and cultural nuances, coming from a multicultural background, I was able to have a lot of those difficult conversations. And so when iHeart saw an opportunity to create this role, they tapped me for it. And even though I never had any DEI experience, it was work that I was really passionate about and that I really wanted to do. So I accepted the role. I went from a sales role to a diversity and inclusion role. So I went from dealing with clients externally and strategy and business and revenue conversations to deeper conversations around DE&I, about employee resources and education, and how do we create more space for belonging in the company? How do we help employees of color feel more supported, more seen, more celebrated? And I have to say that when I got into that role, I was very excited with what I was hearing from leadership, what I was hearing from my manager, the way that they were so invested in the opportunity. I was just very pleased and very happy with what I was seeing. And I was excited to get into that role. Um, whether it was performative or not, I couldn't tell. I thought it was very genuine at that point. And then I would say very quickly, like 6 months into it, I noticed that the momentum that had been building around this role and around the work was kind of like de-escalating and being deprioritized and not a focus anymore. And this is where I started to have an internal battle, because I felt so much urgency to do the work. I felt so ready to jump in and to just figure out all these things that we needed to do. But I still needed that leadership backing. I still needed the green light. I still needed the funding, the resources, the empowerment from leaders to say, go do it. I didn't have that. I never had that. And 6 months into it, I was initiating projects, but I was never able to finish them because I never got the buy-in, the approval, the green light. So I got into this cycle of frustration because I saw that there was a lot of need to do this work at the company. Employees of color were now seeing me as someone that they could really trust and lean on, and someone that was really bring solutions. But I was far from that. I was really not able to bring any of those solutions because in my role, I didn't really have autonomy to implement anything, to greenlight anything. I really needed to still go through my manager and the leadership team. And when they were not invested in it, there was just so much that I can do. And the interest was not there to really dive into DE&I. Unfortunately, when you're dealing with a traditional media company, it's very hard to have them come around to new ideas, to new ways of thinking. It's hard for them to understand younger generations, multicultural generations. It's very hard to kind of make the case to change a system that supposedly has been working, right? It's very hard to make them understand that populations are changing. They're younger, they're more multicultural, they're looking for different things. Employees of color are now getting in these roles and getting into the corporate environment, and they're seeking, those career opportunities, the leadership roles. And so there needs to be a process in place to kind of bring, that talent pipeline up the ranks. So it's very hard to make the case when you're dealing with a traditional media company. I think the benefit of tech startups and younger companies is that this is now part of how they operate, their foundation. But when you think about a old media company that's been around for, I don't even know how many decades iHeart has been around, but it's hard to make the case. And so I found myself in that role with a lot of motivation to do the work, with a lot of hunger to do the work, but without the support from my manager, from my leaders. I went through like a period of like 2 years where I was going through this cycle of trying to launch initiatives, putting a lot of effort into it, a lot of work, and then it not continuing or not being approved or greenlit. And so I had to ask myself, okay, I really want to do this work. I feel called to this work. I feel like this is one of the roles that has a lot of purpose for me, but I'm here and I'm not able to do anything. Literally my hands are tied, and employees are looking at me and they're expecting me to be more vocal, to do more, to bring change, and I'm not able to. And I found myself having to make a really tough decision between, do I continue, and do I continue to get paid? I was getting paid very well at iHeartMedia. I talked about my negotiation, and I'm very grateful for that. I had to make the difficult decision to say, okay, do I continue to get paid and just be a figurehead? Or do I stop the games, stop pretending I'm driving any type of impact, I'm doing any of this work, and just go somewhere else? It was very hard to make that decision. And I have to say that towards the end of that, I was starting to feel ready for something else, for especially I think after the pandemic, where um, a lot of us are just trying to figure out our purpose and how do we serve others? How do we bring impact to the world? I was starting to feel that itch, that hard, those heartstrings being pulled, like, Yesenia, okay, so you're doing this media thing. Is that really what you want to continue doing? Is there other work that you can be doing that where you drive bigger impact, where you're helping others? What is it? I was starting to feel that, but I didn't know how to articulate it. And then when it came time to leave this role and I made the decision to leave iHeartMedia, I was very vocal about the reasons why I wanted to leave the role. And, my manager can attest to the full transparency that I had. I was just so passionate about the work itself that I just felt like it was an insult that I was hired to do a job and I wasn't allowed to do the job. So I left. I was there for almost 4 years, 2019 to 2023. It was a difficult decision because the job market it's been 2 years since I left, and the job market feels like it keeps getting worse. So making that decision to leave without another job lined up was very scary for me. It was not a decision that I wish on anyone, because I literally was in the middle of like, okay, am I sure about this? How am I going to support myself? I had a plan, I had savings, I had ways to like support myself, right? And back myself up, but it was still scary. Even when I felt like I was prepared to make that decision, it was very scary. But I did it. I went through with it. And when I left, I started to think about, okay, what other companies would I want to work for? And I made a list. And then I was like, no, 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 no. I felt I just needed a break from corporate. Like maybe my time in corporate had come to an end. That's how it felt. I didn't feel motivated to go to any other company. I feel around that time, we just keep hearing bad news after bad news after bad news about companies killing their DEI programs, companies defunding DEI, companies going back on their multicultural practice and their multicultural commitment. And I'm just like, I don't want to go to any company that doesn't support my community. I don't want to go to another DEI role that does not allow me to do the work that I know I can do. And so that's when I was kind of like, okay, so maybe if I don't want to go to any other company, maybe it's time for me to end my corporate career. Maybe this is when I finally take that step out of corporate, maybe do my own thing. So I went through a period of a lot of confusion and like some regret, and obviously, navigating those feelings when you leave your job is very difficult, especially as an immigrant, as a woman of color. We combat a lot of that uncertainty, and this is where you really come close to understanding if you're operating from a scarcity mindset or from abundance mindset, if you really are prepared to weather the storm, if your savings are going to hold up, what is your family going to say? Are you crazy leaving a company like iHeart? I just talked about how amazing it was at the beginning. Um, it's a lot to think about, but I did it. It's been 2 years. It'll be 2 years. No, actually, it was 2 years in July. And I don't regret my decision at all now. So after I left iHeartMedia, I took a few months off and then I jumped back into consulting. And I was consulting for small media companies that were trying to create a bigger platform in the multicultural space. So I had a lot of fun doing that. And I got to work with family owned media brands. And, I got to meet so many wonderful people. Um, and it was fun to do that independently and to know that, okay, outside of corporate, I can find independent work. I can work on my own. I can be an entrepreneur. So I did that for a span of a year. And then it was just this past March that I had to have a very serious conversation with myself and say, okay, Yesenia, you left iHeart, you left corporate because you said that you wanted to do other things. But here you are doing the same thing, working for a media company, working in advertising and sales. Do you really want to do something new, or did you just say you wanted to do that? So I had to take a really hard look at myself, and I was also going through some personal stuff. I've spoken about my hysterectomy, and the impact that had on me emotionally, spiritually, physically. And so after a lot of therapy and dialogue with myself, I said, it's really time to leave my career here on a good note. And now it's time for me to venture into new things. And so after that, I formulated my full idea for the podcast. I'm working on a few different personal projects. I am about to launch a leadership coaching service that is geared towards women of color. It's basically bringing wellness into the career success trajectory. A lot of people are chasing audacious goals in their career, but in the process, they're maybe losing themselves, losing, a little bit of their values, losing their health, their mental health, their wellness. And so I want to bring that holistic wellness approach to career success, to personal success. I want to help people redefine what success means to them. I want them to feel, number one, aligned with their career that they're at. I want them to feel joy. I want them to feel purpose. I want them to be intentional about everything they're chasing. I want them to stop chasing things that they don't really want. Maybe they think they need to chase it, but maybe They don't need to be chasing that. So at the core of it, I want people to be happier with how they make money, where they go to work, and just feel fulfilled. Because as I said in my last episode, we spent anywhere from 30 to 50 years in our careers. And unfortunately, sometimes it's too late when we realize that, dang, I wish I would have had more fun, or I wish I would have dared enough to go after that one thing, or I wish I would have thought about it differently. I wish I wasn't so serious about it. I wish I would have been um, more community driven. I wish I would have given back more. I wish I would have been more compassionate, more loving. I don't want any of us to have those. I wish. I want us all to say, wow, I was so purposeful about my career. I was so intentional. I had so much fun. I enjoyed it. I helped people. I loved the people that I worked with. I gave back to my community. I really believed in myself. I really held to my values, to my purpose. I want us to have that conversation instead. So when I decided to leave my corporate career, and by the way, when you leave corporate, you always kind of are navigating that those feelings of like, okay, I'm scared. Like, what if I don't get any clients? What if I have to go back? Like, I'm very humble, and I know that if I have to go back to corporate tomorrow, and if I could find an amazing job, work with amazing people, I would consider it. But for now, I really want to try this, and I really want to help women and men, professionals in general, just find more purpose in what they're doing, find more joy. I want us to be able to create our success from a place where we feel empowered and whole and loving. And so that's what I want to create. And so when I put my career on the side after iHeartMedia, and I launched the podcast, I was thinking, okay, all these lessons over 22 years, all these lessons, all these experiences, all this joy, all of the learning. I want people to hear this, and I want people to take away the good, the bad, the ugly. I want them to feel empowered to make bold career decisions. And so that's why I created this career series. And on that note, I want to go through the lessons, the 5 lessons that I learned from that last role at iHeart. First lesson is the least expected company could be exactly what you need. So I didn't know about iHeartMedia. I didn't know that it was such a massive, fun, exciting company until that recruiter called me up. And sometimes, like, we see these opportunities on our LinkedIn and our emails, on our phones, and we're like, nah, I don't know who they are. They don't sound like they're cool enough or they're big enough. But I'm so glad that I took that call. I'm so glad that I decided to listen to that recruiter. I'm so glad that I took a chance, even though it didn't pan out like I wanted to in the end. I'm so glad that I took a chance, and I got myself out of that stressful situation, and I got to experience a whole different culture. Sometimes we put so much pressure into these job decisions, and you really have to just um, balance what it is that you're looking for. I wanted to land somewhere that I just felt better, where I felt better at, where I felt like, okay, I could still make some money, I could still learn something. I just want to feel normal again. And I did that. And so my recommendation is sometimes giving a shot to a startup, to a company that maybe you don't know about. Maybe it's exactly what you need. So don't be afraid to do that. The second lesson is a lesson on self-empowerment. Sometimes as a woman of color in corporate, there's not a lot of us. Number one, a lot of opportunities are not given to us when it comes to growing in our career, salary, and all of these things. And it's very easy to kind of like put your head down and like just take it and just settle for whatever you're being offered. But one of the things that I'm most proud about is how I advocated for myself in that job at iHeart. I encountered some shenanigans because, like as I mentioned, it's very male dominated, very traditional in thinking. And I was a Latina coming from Google. I was very bold and I was just like, so empowered by the time I left Google that I really learned in that role, in those two roles, how to advocate for myself, how not to take any BS from anybody. And again, this is a little bit sensitive because I recognize that some people are not in a position to, speak out too much, or, some people are navigating very difficult situations in the workplace. And maybe they really need that job and they don't have the luxury of like risking that job because they want to be vocal or they want to be bold. And I have compassion for those people. So, take this advice and just think about your situation, right? But I am very proud that I, above all, advocated for myself in every single situation. That I think for the first time in my career, I didn't take the BS from anyone. And it gets to a point where you just get tired of like the BS that you deal with as a woman of color. And I'm proud that, maybe sometimes I didn't handle things professionally or with grace, but I'm always proud of the fact that I looked out for myself and I advocated for myself in all the ways that I could. The third lesson is don't ever underestimate the power of people in the workplace. I talked about, the the personalities that I worked with at Google and how it was challenging for me to get used to different personality types and people that are a little bit more structured, rigid in their work, in their approach. But I think the workplace has evolved so much in the last few years, and we can never allow to lose that warmth in the workplace, the love, the compassion, the friendliness, the welcoming. That made a world of difference for me. And at iHeartMedia, I think that's one of the things that I took away. The most beautiful things that I took away was that the people that I got to work with, the people that have been there for 20 plus years, that just were welcoming me with open arms and a lot of love and a lot of acceptance. And so let's not lose that in the corporate environment. I know that the work itself can get very intense at times, but let's not lose that, happiness, that environment of community, because it's needed more than ever. It's needed. I think the corporate space has gone through so many changes, and a lot of the changes have impacted businesses and people. That more than ever, we need that like career love, job love, manager. If you're a manager, love on your employees. If you're an employee, love on your manager. We all need to come together and like bring back that love, that happiness, that excitement to our workplace. Lesson number 4 is know when to leave the party. So I could have stayed at iHeart. I could have finished my contract. I could have stuck it out. I could have continued to get paid. But it became a matter of like my values and what I stood for. And I just did not want to be a figurehead. And so, weigh your options, look at your situation. But if you're finding yourself in a place in your job where you're no longer valued, and when you are not able to do the work that you can do, when you're not able to fully exercise the full extent of your capacity, know when to leave. It could be the biggest company. And maybe you don't even have to leave the company. Maybe it's just leaving that role. But you have to really know when to leave, because I could have stretched out the next 6 months or maybe the next year. Who knows? But what was that going to do to my spirit? What was that going to do to my morale? It was not going to be a good thing for me. So I think learning when to leave and how to leave the party early is truly a gift that we must know how to implement in our lives. And the last lesson number 5, and this one is about leaving corporate. Um, it's not for everybody. It's not something that I believe everybody needs to do. Absolutely not. There's definitely a lot of people finding purpose, joy in what they do in their corporate careers. There's a lot of people that find fulfillment, that are doing amazing, incredible work where they can serve others and they can just do things that matter. There's a lot of people doing that right now. So, leaving your corporate role is not the message here. It's really more about understanding when it's time to pivot, when maybe you've had enough of the things that you've been doing, and maybe it's time to pivot because you have a big passion for something that you have not been able to do. Maybe you have a lot of talent for something that you want to go and explore. Maybe your children are grown up and now you can focus on you and you can now explore the full extent of your creativity and your passions. Maybe it's just like corporate is not your thing. Um, Coaching women on that path is a passion point for me, because it's a pivot that is not easy, but it's doable. And when it comes to leaving corporate or staying in corporate, I think what I most care about is that whether you're in it or you're out of it, that you find fulfillment, that you find some joy, that you are doing what you want to be doing, that you are standing up for yourself, that you're not selling yourself short, that you're getting paid what you deserve, that you're going for the opportunities that are out there for you and you're not afraid to do so. So that's really what it's all about. Thank you so much for listening to this series. The next and last episode is The Art of Reinvention: How Women Can Create Their Own Blueprint for Success. This is something that I'm very passionate about, so I hope you tune in. Thank you again for listening. If you haven't, go catch up on the Behind the Success series. There's 6 episodes available. This is the 7th, and then 1 more coming. Thank you again, and have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your week. Thank you for listening to the Mujeres Create podcast. I hope you enjoyed the episode, and don't forget to share the wisdom with other mujeres.